My name is Ava, and the night my brother told me, "You're only invited because Mom pities you," was the night my place in this family finally died. Before I tell you exactly how it happened, I want something from you. If you've ever been humiliated by your own blood, if you've ever walked into a room where you were technically invited, but clearly unwanted, tell me in the comments. Tell me who did it, what they said, how it felt. Share this video with the one person who would actually understand, and stay with me until the end, because the way this story ends is nothing like what they expected. The invitation didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like a deadline. It came as a text, of course. My brother doesn't call me unless he needs something official, something he doesn't understand, something that requires a signature. Mom wants you here Sunday, 7 p.m., family dinner. No, please? No, can you make it? No emoji to soften the edge. Just an instruction delivered like a court summons. I stared at the screen for a long time. The three dots never appeared. He fired it off and vanished, as if that was enough. I typed, deleted, typed again. Is this like a special occasion or what? I hit send, then watched the chat window like it owed me an answer. A full minute passed. Then, she said it's important. Just be on time. Important. If it were actually important, she would have called me herself. She used to. Back when I still existed as more than a background function in this family. Back when I was the daughter, not the placeholder. My thumb hovered over the call icon next to her name, but I didn't press it. I knew how it would go. The breathy guilt. The awkward small talk. The way she'd pretend my brother hadn't sent that message like he was her spokesperson. Instead, I typed, "Fine, I'll be there." No smiley, no heart, no can't wait. Just a confirmation, because I knew that's all they wanted from me. On Sunday, I was early. Of course I was. I know how they talk when anyone is late. Typical, my brother would say. She can't even do this one thing right. I refused to give him that line. The sky was already dark when I pulled up outside the house. The windows glowed with warm yellow light, the kind that was supposed to look inviting in real estate photos. Through the curtains, I could see shadows moving around the dining room, people crossing back and forth, voices overlapping in a familiar rhythm I no longer belonged to. I sat in my car for a full 30 seconds, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the front door. I didn't feel excited. I didn't feel nervous. I felt measured, like I was walking into a test I hadn't agreed to take. I got out, smoothed down my dress, and walked up the path I knew by heart. The door was unlocked. It always was when family was expected. I pushed it open and stepped inside. Laughter hit me first. Not the light, easy kind. Sharp bursts, overlapping, the kind that comes from people already mid-story, mid-drink, mid-bonding. I was late to the mood, not the time. "Hello?" I called out, closing the door behind me. No one answered. The sound of conversation kept rolling from the dining room, like a show that had started without me. Footsteps passed the hallway entrance, but no one glanced over. I walked down the corridor, past the framed photos that still had my face in them, back when I was allowed to be a part of the family mythology. My younger self frozen in birthdays, graduations, hospital corridors. My brother was in all of them too. His smile always looked effortless. Mine always looked like work. At the end of the hallway, I stopped. I could see part of the dining room from where I stood. The chandelier was on, casting sharp light over the long wooden table. Plates, glasses, wine bottles, bowls, people. Every chair was taken. Every single chair. Something cold slid down my spine. I took one step forward, just enough to be seen. My brother turned first. He was standing near the head of the table, leaning against the back of his chair like he owned the room. He wore that easy half smile he used on clients and distant relatives, the one that said, "I'm relaxed. I'm in control. I'm the favorite." His eyes landed on me, and the smile tightened. "Oh," he said. "You made it. Mom looked up from her place at the other end. Her hand froze around a serving spoon. Her eyes flickered from me to the table, then down, as if she didn't quite know where to land. My aunt glanced over, gave me a quick, strained smile, and then busied herself with a napkin that didn't need adjusting. I stepped fully into the doorway. "Yeah," I said. "I was invited, remember?" My brother's gaze slid over me, slow and evaluating. Then he pushed off the chair and took a step closer, stopping so that only he and I could hear the next sentence clearly, though I knew everyone would feel it. He leaned in just a fraction, enough so that his voice dropped, but didn't soften. "You're only invited," he said, "because Mom pities you." The room did not go silent. That would have been kinder. The conversations kept going, but thinner now, like everyone was pretending not to have heard while straining to catch every word. A fork scraped too hard against a plate. Someone coughed. I felt the words land inside my chest with a dull, heavy precision. No shock. Shock requires surprise. This didn't surprise me. It confirmed what I had already suspected. I looked past him, at the table, at the place where my chair should have been. There was no gap, no empty space, no extra setting waiting for me. The table was complete without me, like it had been arranged for a closed circle, and I was a misprint that had slipped through. I met my brother's eyes again. He held my gaze, testing for a reaction, waiting for anger, for tears, for begging. Nothing came. "Got it," I said quietly. Then I walked past him, past the table, past the life they'd curated to exclude me, and kept moving deeper into the room, not to sit, not to join, but because I needed to see every detail clearly before I decided what to do with it. I stood there longer than I should have, not frozen, aware. The dining room smelled like roasted meat and wine and the faint sweetness of whatever dessert was cooling somewhere out of sight. The table was packed tight, shoulder to shoulder, elbows occasionally bumping, laughter spilling too loud as if volume could erase discomfort. No one moved to make space. Not immediately. My brother reclaimed his position near the head of the table like nothing significant had happened. He picked up his glass, took a slow sip, eyes flicking toward me over the rim, as if checking whether I was still standing, whether I'd cracked yet. Mom finally spoke. Not my name. Never my name. "Oh," she said, staring at the plates. "I thought we had one more chair." Her voice was soft, careful, a lie wrapped in fog. No one answered her. My aunt shifted in her seat and murmured, "We can grab one from the other room," without making any move to do it. My cousin let out a quick, nervous laugh, then stopped when no one joined in. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. The scrape never came. No legs against hardwood. No one stood up. No one offered. I realized then that the chair hadn't been forgotten. It had been removed. There were exactly as many place settings as people seated. Plates aligned with bodies. Glasses filled to the same level. Even the napkins were folded with deliberate symmetry. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision made earlier. Calmly, probably with a shrug. Someone had counted. I stepped closer to the table and rested my hand lightly on the back of my mother's chair. She stiffened under my touch as if I'd burned her. "So where am I supposed to sit?" I asked. The question hung there, exposed. Mom didn't look at me. She fussed with the serving spoon, stirring sauce that didn't need stirring. "Well," she said slowly, "we didn't think—" My brother cut in smoothly. "You can pull one in from the kitchen if you want. If you want." Like I was asking for an accommodation, like this was my inconvenience to manage. I looked at him. "You want me to stand up halfway through dinner carrying a chair through everyone to squeeze in?" He shrugged, lips curling. "Or you could eat later. It's not a big deal." A few heads nodded reflexively, relieved that he'd provided an option that didn't involve any of them moving. Not a big deal. I scanned the faces around the table one by one. People I'd celebrated with, people I'd covered for, people who had texted me when they needed something but forgot my birthday without fail. My cousin wouldn't meet my eyes. My aunt stared directly at her plate. My uncle cleared his throat and took a drink. No one said, "I'll move." No one said, "Sit here." No one said, "This isn't right." I was standing at the edge of the table like an afterthought made visible. My brother leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, satisfied now. The moment had landed exactly how he wanted. He didn't need to say anything else. The room was doing his work for him. I felt something shift inside me. Not break. Set. "Okay," I said. My voice sounded steady even to me. That surprised them. Mom finally looked up then, eyes full of something that almost resembled concern. "Ava, we can figure something out." I smiled at her. Just a little. Enough to make her pause. "You already did," I said. I stepped back from the table. The movement caught their attention faster than any raised voice would have. Chairs creaked as people turned. Conversation died in patches, then altogether. "What are you doing?" my brother asked, irritation creeping into his tone. He hated losing control of a scene. I reached for my coat draped over the back of a nearby chair, the closest I'd get to sitting, and slipped it on. "I'm leaving." There it was. Clear. Undeniable. Mom stood up halfway, her chair scraping just enough to be heard now. "Don't be dramatic." I laughed once, short and sharp. "You removed my seat," I said. "I think dramatics were already on the agenda." My brother scoffed. "You're seriously walking out over something this stupid?" I looked at him then. Really looked. At the confidence he'd built on the assumption that I would always swallow whatever he handed me, that I'd stay silent, that I'd take it. "This," I said slowly, "isn't stupid. It's accurate." Silence finally arrived. Thick. Awkward. Unavoidable. No one tried to stop me as I walked toward the door. No apologies followed. No footsteps behind me. Just the faint clink of silverware as someone, somewhere, decided it was safe enough to start eating. I opened the door and paused. For a moment, I thought about turning around, about saying something unforgettable, about demanding they look at me. Instead, I pulled the door closed behind me and let it lock itself. The sound echoed longer than it should have. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from clarity. They had taken my chair. That was fine. They just hadn't realized yet what else they'd lost. The night air hit me like silence made physical. Cold, sharp, unforgiving. I stood on the driveway for a second longer than necessary, my keys dangling from my fingers, the faint hum of voices still leaking through the walls behind me. Laughter again. Faster this time. Relieved. The kind of laughter people use when danger has passed and they've decided you don't matter enough to follow. No one came after me. That detail lodged itself somewhere, deep and permanent. I unlocked my car and slid inside, shutting the door quietly. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to announce my exit. I'd done enough of that for one lifetime. The engine started on the first try, as if even the car understood urgency better than my family ever had. I pulled away from the curb slowly, forcing myself not to look back at the house. I already knew what I'd see. Light, movement, life continuing without me. I didn't need that image branded into my head again. The road was almost empty. Streetlights stretched overhead like indifferent witnesses, each one illuminating me for a moment before letting me slip back into darkness. I drove with both hands clenched on the wheel, knuckles white, jaw locked so tight my teeth ached. I didn't cry. That bothered me more than anything. I waited for the familiar burn in my throat, the pressure behind my eyes, but it never came. Just a steady, pulsing awareness spreading through my chest. Not pain, recognition. They hadn't snapped tonight. They had finished something that started years ago. I passed the diner where my brother and I used to stop after school, the gas station where my mom used to wait late at night when he didn't come home on time. Landmarks of a history that now felt counterfeit, like set pieces left standing after the show had ended. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Once. I didn't look. If it was anyone from inside that house, it would be too late. And if it wasn't, if it was work, or a notification, or nothing important, then it could wait until I remembered how to breathe fully again. I drove until the streets grew narrower, quieter, until the city thinned out into something that felt more honest. The sky overhead was deep black now, no stars visible, just layered darkness. That's when it hit me, not as emotion, but as fact. I had been managing their lives for years without ever being allowed to stand in them. I had signed papers, made calls, handled crises they never even knew existed. I had carried weight silently while they decided where I was allowed to sit. And the worst part? They didn't even think about that when they took my chair. Because to them, that work didn't count as presence. It didn't count as belonging. It was invisible labor, done quietly in the background while real family mattered at the table. My phone buzzed again, twice this time. I exhaled slowly through my nose and reached over, flipping it face down without checking. The vibration stopped, leaving a hollow quiet in the car that felt intentional, earned. I turned onto my street a few minutes later. My apartment building stood there like it always did, plain, dimly lit, unremarkable. No voices, no waiting audience, no expectation. I parked, shut off the engine, and just sat. The silence wrapped around me, thick but clean. No undertones, no traps. Inside my chest, something unwound. Not relief, resolution. I gathered my bag and walked to the door, each step measured, deliberate. My body still trembled slightly. Not weakness, but recalibration, like something ancient shifting into alignment. When I unlocked my apartment and stepped inside, the lights stayed off. I didn't need them. I knew my space. Every object in it was mine because I had chosen it. Nothing here required permission. I closed the door behind me and leaned my forehead against the cool wood for a moment. That's when my phone lit up again. This time, the vibration didn't stop quickly. It surged, one notification after another, like a system catching up all at once. I didn't turn around. I didn't reach for it. I already knew, instinctively, that this wasn't about guilt or apology. Something had moved. Something official. Something irreversible. I straightened slowly, pushing away from the door. Whatever they were just starting to realize back at that table, I had been living with for years. They had walked me out of the room. Now they were about to understand what walking away actually looked like. They never asked me how the paperwork got done. That's the thing people like my brother never notice. Things don't just happen. Bills don't pay themselves. Decisions don't materialize out of thin air. Hospitals don't move without signatures. Properties don't stay clean, insured, compliant, and profitable by accident. They just assumed someone handled it. That someone was me. I crossed the room and finally picked up my phone, not to answer it, just to stop the vibrating. The screen was flooded with notifications, but I swiped them away without reading. I already understood the cause. I didn't need the noise yet. Instead, I opened a folder I hadn't looked at in weeks. Not hidden, not locked, just ignored by everyone who didn't want to understand what responsibility actually looked like. Years ago, before the family dinners became polite warfare, before my brother learned that cruelty could pass as confidence, Mom had trusted me with something she didn't trust him to carry. She'd set it in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. "You're calm," she whispered, fingers cold in mine. "You'll do the right thing." I hadn't agreed out loud. I didn't have to. I was already signing forms while my brother paced the hallway complaining about parking. Temporary authority, they called it. Just for now, they said. Just until things settle, they promised. Things never settled. They evolved. They expanded. They required follow-ups, renewals, conversations that made people uncomfortable. Conversations about property lines, taxes, liability, planning for what if. My brother hated those words. What if implied imagining a future where he might need to act. He preferred the present, where everything magically worked. So I handled it. I learned the systems. I sat through meetings where men spoke past me until I corrected. Them using their own language. I kept records, copies, backups. I corrected mistakes before they became disasters. I was the name professionals called when something went wrong, because I was the only one who ever answered. And the entire time, no one thought to ask me how any of it functioned. At the table, my brother talked loud about success and plans, about someday, about inheritance like it was a guarantee instead of a structure someone had to maintain. He liked power in theory. I dealt with it in practice. My phone lit up again on the counter. I ignored it and poured myself a glass of water. Hands finally steady now. The emotional shock had passed. What remained was calculation, quiet, precise. I opened my laptop and logged in. The interface loaded exactly as it always had. No resistance, no drama, just access. There it was, the documentation chain, amendments, updates that had already been scheduled, reviewed, approved weeks ago. Notifications triggered by timing, not spite. That part mattered. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is impulsive, sloppy, loud. This was structural. My name sat where it had always sat, just farther up the hierarchy now. Primary contact, decision authority, executor designation confirmed. The system didn't care who had dinner together tonight. The system cared about consistency. I thought about the way my brother had leaned in to say that line, the confidence behind it, the assumption that pity was the only currency I had left. He didn't know that every time he dismissed me, he was reinforcing the reason Mom trusted me instead of him. He never asked why professionals spoke to me, not him. Why forms were addressed to my email. Why deadlines were always met without his involvement. He liked the performance. I handled the infrastructure. The irony settled deep and satisfying in my chest. Back at that table, they believed presence equaled power. That being seen, heard, seated, mattered more than what happened when the lights went off and the doors closed. They were wrong. I closed the laptop gently and picked up my phone. 32 missed calls, a dozen messages, one voicemail from Mom I did not open. Not yet. I set the phone face down on the counter and leaned back against it, staring at the ceiling. They had humiliated me publicly. Now the architecture of their comfort was adjusting itself quietly. And the most devastating part? They still didn't know enough to ask the right questions. The first alert hit at 9:47 p.m., sharp, neutral, automated. My phone didn't explode, it stacked. One vibration after another, disciplined, almost polite, the kind of sound systems make when they're doing exactly what they were built to do. I picked it up. No names yet, just process. Property ownership updated, new primary contact. Ava R. My breath didn't catch. My heart didn't race. I just stared at the screen and let the weight of those words settle where humiliation had been earlier. Then another. Utility access. Modified authorized user changed another. Account permissions confirmed. The timestamps were tight, back to back. The system wasn't reacting to emotion, it was executing sequence. I imagined my brother's phone lighting up on the table, bright screen, sudden vibration cutting through conversation. I pictured him glancing down, irritation already forming because something dared to interrupt him, then confusion. He would have frowned first. That's how he always reacted to anything that didn't immediately make sense. He hated not understanding things in front of people. Someone would have asked, "Everything okay?" He would have waved it off. "Yeah, just spam." Then the second alert would hit. Then the third. And suddenly, the attention he'd worked so hard to maintain would drift away from him, toward glowing screens, whispered questions, brows tightening in synchronized doubt. I didn't need to be there to know how it unraveled. I knew those people better than they knew me. My phone started ringing. Brother, ignored. Brother again, ignored. A group chat notification popped up. The old family thread that had gone quiet when I stopped initiating holidays. Brother. Ava, what did you do? No greeting, no clarification, just accusation, already sharpened. Another alert slid in over the message like punctuation. Document status. Locked pending review by primary contact missed call. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Her message icon glowed insistently, but I didn't tap it. I didn't want her voice yet. Not softened, not trembling, not coded in confusion she couldn't claim honestly. The system wasn't broken. The system was updating. My phone buzzed again with something different this time, a tone I hadn't assigned to people. Administrative priority. Contact authorization changed. Confirmation required. I clicked. Confirm without hesitation. Across town, seats scraped back. Someone would have stood up now. My brother, probably, moving away from the table so he could talk without witnesses. Rage always needed privacy with him. Another call came in immediately after. Mom. I answered this one. Not because I owed her comfort, but because silence gains its power from precision. Ava? Her voice cracked on my name like it hadn't been used in days. What's happening? Your brother says... He says he's getting messages about the house. The house? I repeated. Calm. Yes. Why would that change tonight? I smiled. She couldn't see it, but she could hear it in my voice. Not warmth, control. Because tonight was the trigger. A pause. Then quieter. Did something happen at dinner? I said nothing. She filled the silence the way people always do when confronted with consequences. He didn't mean anything cruel. Mom, I interrupted. Don't. That stopped her. In the background, I could hear voices, panicked, overlapping. My brother, louder than the rest, trying to wrestle dominance back from a situation that didn't care who he was. Ava, she whispered now. You need to explain. No, I said. I really don't. I ended the call. Immediately, another alert followed, then another. Each one clean, clinical, unemotional, the way power prefers to move. Primary contact verified, execution complete. Back at that table, forks would have been abandoned, meals forgotten. Eyes darting from phone to phone like prey, sensing the shift too late. My phone finally went quiet. I placed its screen down on the counter, poured myself another glass of water, and leaned against the sink. They'd taken my chair to make a point. Now every system they relied on had taken its cues from me, and none of them could stand up fast enough to stop it. They showed up the next morning. Not together. Never together when they were scared. But close enough that the echo of one knock was barely gone before another followed. I didn't rush to the door. I finished my coffee first. Let it cool just enough. Let the quiet stretch. Panic ripens if you give it time. The knocking came again, sharper now. Not angry yet. Still negotiating. I opened the door on the third knock. My brother was standing closest, jaw tight, eyes already scanning behind me like he expected to find someone else pulling the strings. Mom stood half a step back, coat still on, purse clutched like armor. Her hair wasn't done. That alone told me everything. They hadn't planned this visit. They'd reacted. Ava, my brother said, pushing the name out like it tasted unfamiliar. We need to talk. I stepped aside without answering. He took that as permission and walked in first. Of course he did. He always entered spaces like he owned them. Mom followed more carefully, glancing around as if my apartment might accuse her. They both stopped in the living room. Not because there wasn't room, but because they sensed something they couldn't name. This place wasn't set up for them. No family photos, no extra chairs, no seats waiting to be claimed. You caused a situation last night, my brother said, turning to face me. His voice was already climbing. He couldn't help himself. Loudness was his substitute for certainty. I didn't cause anything, I said. I triggered a process. Don't play games, he snapped. You know exactly what you did. I'm locked out of access, of decisions, of things I'm supposed to inherit? I cut in. Mom flinched. That's not what this is about, she said quickly, stepping between us like a weak referee. We're just confused. This all happened so suddenly. I tilted my head. Suddenly? Yes. That was always the word people like to use when consequences stop asking permission. My brother scoffed and turned away from me, pacing once across the room. Then he rounded back, pointing toward the door behind him. You think you can just walk out of dinner and flip a switch? You embarrassed us. I met his eyes calmly. You removed my seat. That's not the point. It's the only point. Silence dropped. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. You didn't have to leave like that. You didn't have to erase me like that. Her shoulders sagged. Good. Let it land. My brother exhaled hard through his nose. Okay, he said, trying a different angle. Fine. The dinner got messy. Emotions were high. Let's reset. Reset. That word was almost funny. He gestured around my apartment, dismissive now. We can talk this out like adults, but you need to undo what you did. Immediately. I walked to the counter, picked up my phone, and unlocked it. Not to comply, but to anchor myself. Tell me, I said, what exactly you think I did. He hesitated. Just a fraction. Long enough to expose the truth. I don't know, he admitted, then hardened. I just know things are changing in ways they shouldn't. I looked at Mom. Did you tell him? She looked away. She didn't tell him, I said softly. Of course she didn't, because she never explained it to you either. Mom's lips trembled. I didn't think it was supposed to be temporary. Temporary is what people call it when they plan to forget. My brother laughed, but there was no humor in it now. This is insane. You don't even live there. No, I agreed. I manage it. I stepped closer, not aggressive, just unavoidable. For years. Quietly, while you played host at that table. He opened his mouth to interrupt. I didn't let him. You asked where my chair was, I said. You wanted to know why I walked out? I held his gaze until he stilled. Because I finally understood something you never will. I finished. I don't need a seat where I'm not respected. Mom whispered my name again. Softer now, almost afraid of it. Ava, please. This time, when I looked at her, I didn't harden. I didn't soften either. You should go, I said. My brother stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Like he was suddenly standing barehanded in front of a locked door he'd assumed would always open. This isn't over, he said. I nodded. No, it's finished. I opened the front door and stepped aside. They left without another word. And for the first time, they walked away from a room that had no chair for them, while I remained standing exactly where I belonged. I didn't follow them to the window. I didn't watch their car pull away. I didn't need the image of retreat burned into my mind. Some confirmations are unnecessary when the structure has already shifted. I closed the door, turned the lock once, slowly, and rested my hand there for a moment, not to steady myself, to acknowledge that this boundary was real, physical, and no longer theoretical. The apartment was quiet again. Clean quiet. The kind that doesn't wait for permission. I went back to the counter and sat. Not because I suddenly needed a chair, but because I wanted one. The difference mattered. Every piece of furniture in this room existed because I allowed it to. Nothing here had been counted without me in mind. My phone buzzed once. Not them. Administrative confirmation. Status update. Primary contact confirmed, all requests routed accordingly. I locked the phone and set it aside. Back at that house, they would be rearranging things now, whispering, replaying conversations, arguing over who knew what and when. My brother would be furious, not because he cared about me, but because the narrative had slipped out of his hands, because power he assumed was his had been quietly reassigned. Mom would sit somewhere uncomfortable, replaying the moment she noticed the missing chair and chose not to fix it. Not because she didn't see it, but because not seeing it was easier. They would call again. Maybe not today. Maybe after panic curdled into strategy. They would try softer voices. Bargains. language designed to shrink me back into place. They would want a meeting. I wouldn't give them one. Because here's the part they still don't understand. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger would have tied me to their table, made me argue for space, made me prove something. I didn't need to prove anything. I had already outgrown the room. They thought walking out meant I was weak. That silence was surrender. That by leaving without a scene, I had forfeited something. What I forfeited was access. What I retained was control. The chair they removed wasn't just a seat. It was a test, a final calibration, and they failed it spectacularly. I stood and crossed the room, opening the blinds fully now. Morning light flooded in, sharp and honest. Nothing in this space pretended to be warm while hiding an edge. I checked the time, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my day mattered again. I had obligations, not to them, but to systems that ran because I touched them, to decisions that carried weight because my name stood behind them. Somewhere, my brother would be telling himself this was temporary, that I'd cool off, that I'd come back eventually, apologize maybe, accept a chair again. He didn't understand permanence. He never had. I grabbed my keys and bag, paused once more by the door, and then left. Not in retreat, not in defiance, but in motion. The kind that doesn't look back because it doesn't revolve around what's behind it. They could keep their table. They could keep their carefully counted chairs and curated laughter and hollow authority. I was done asking where I belonged. I didn't need a seat anymore, because I was no longer a guest in a life designed to exclude me. I was the point of contact, and now finally I was unreachable.